All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to yet another interesting episode on the gaming podcast by Underdog. Today, I have one of my dear friend Harish from Outlier Games. Hi Harish. Welcome to the channel. We've been thinking of doing this podcast for a long time, but we got this opportunity since we, met for the first time, Harish.
Yeah, met for the first
Yeah,
time. Yeah.
met for the first time at this SERB INAE conclave that happened in Delhi. Before we jump onto the conclave and the kind of things that we discussed in it, I would just like Harish to give a brief introduction about himself so that the users, the people who are listening to this podcast may get a brief understanding of what you are doing.
Sure. Thanks for the introduction, Vaibhav. In fact, I'm a bit of a viewer, subscriber of your channel for a long time as well. So from there to be on your podcast, it's like a full circle, I believe.
Nice,
So
nice.
to talk about myself, I think just like many subscribers on this channel, I want to be a game designer since I was 14 years old. Now I'm 25. So I started that journey there, and it was mostly self-learning, self-development. I joined a game college, and we know how the quality of game education in India is. So I had
Absolutely.
to, yeah. So I had to drop out of the college after my second year, and I formed a team initially,
Which college was
so that we
this?
could ICAT.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, yeah. So initially, I formed a small team to more so learn how games are made, so that I understand the process. It's one thing theory, another thing is practical. So we want to
Yeah.
know the practical. And we made few prototypes here and there. None of it worked. We did some hyper casual prototypes that also don't didn't work. Finally, I was like, I always loved storytelling since childhood, right? So I was at a very down phase of my life. I was like, kuch karte hai, like to pick myself up. Let's write a script.
Yeah.
So I wrote a story script for my game Deliverance, and now that is the indie game that we are working on with a team of 6 people. Potentially, we would expand once we get funding. Let's see.
Yeah, yeah. We'll talk about deliverance and what we're doing at Outlier also in a while. But let's just get on to the the core discussion that we were having off camera, right? So we attended this conclave in Delhi, right? Give the audience a brief about what this whole event was, and how did it all start with you?
Okay, sure. So what happened this year is the union budget that was announced in February. They said they are going to form an ABGC task force, right? Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman put it out.
Okay, ABGC. So just to sorry to cut you down. Just for the audience, the ABGC is animation, VFX, gaming, and comic. It's a cumulative, like it's what we call we together all these sectors are called as ABGC sector. And government usually does a lot of initiatives for ABGC sector specifically. So we all who are making games, VFX, animation, comics fall into ABGC sector. Yeah, continue.
Yes. So they put out a call saying that we are going to announce initiative schemes for ABGC.
Yeah,
And I was like, okay, so because gaming is a very wide area, right? So there is AAA, indie, so many different aspects of it. I thought we have to come from the industry side and put forward who we are, what we do, what are the nuances involved. So I
yeah.
made an elaborate report of sorts talking about the game industry of India. And then I don't know who would read it, but I nonetheless put it on Twitter, LinkedIn, everywhere.
I read it. I absolutely, I did read it when you posted it on LinkedIn. And before that, I knew you that you were making a game at Outlier and all that. But I never had an idea that you're also involved into discussing these things. But it was to be honest, it was a comprehensive report that you wrote. It was absolutely impressive.
Yeah, thanks for that. So it thanks to that report actually, SERB people actually took notice of it.
Hmm.
And in the month of June, in the first week of June, they had a pre-conclave to actually plan out the physical event that we attended. Yeah, it's a roller coaster, right? In a span of 1.5 months to actually
Yeah.
pull out the whole event, it was very hectic. But to answer your question, how it started is we went to the pre-conclave. It was virtual. So they had no idea about the industry side of it, and they were very open about it with all of us, right?
Yeah.
So they wanted me to project the industry side of it.
Mm.
At that point, I told, look, boss, I am one among the industry, but there are so many others. Let's involve all of them.
Yeah.
And they also had a similar idea. So that's how we ended up planning this whole conclave, and we ended up in Delhi on the 20th of this month.
Yeah, yeah, but it makes perfect sense because there are different perspectives, different opinions. Also, there are different categories of companies in India. When we say, I'm making a game, you probably would be an indie, just want to make a game because it's your passion project. Then you are like a small startup, you're just starting up, you're a very small team which has a potential and a plan to have a sustainable business later on. And then there are these bigger gaming companies, right? So I think it made perfect sense having multiple perspectives, and that's what and that was a commendable effort from your end to involve industry folks as well.
Yeah. Like initially the idea would have, so I'm not too sure about how it would have went, but then if they didn't see my report, I'm believing it would have been much more oriented towards the academia and research side of things rather than the leisure games industry that we are a part of.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe
Can you just for the audience, can you just explain what leisure games are?
Sure. So in games, we categorize it in many forms, right? So there is simulation games, as in you would have seen any VR related games where a surgeon can practice how to do surgery. So that would be simulation. Leisure games are just what we do for entertainment,
Yeah.
for consoles, PC, and mobile, etc. Likewise, just game for education and learning. So these are the broad categories in games.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were saying about how did it start? So just to again summarize it, you wrote a report, which was like a very comprehensive report. You posted it online. Someone took a notice of it from the SERB. Yeah, and then they thought of collaborating and doing all this stuff. Now, tell me what exactly was the agenda of this event. Um, you know, See, most of the times when we talk about event or the conferences, it's usually people who attend to get knowledge about stuff, and there are speakers who talk about various subjects, and then that's how the knowledge transfer happens. But this was different. We all were there. It was different. Can you It would be great if you can explain. Because at the end of it, usually in a conference is just knowledge transfer, but for this conclave specifically, it was more of coming to a conclusion, coming to some pointers, right? So just give the audience a brief agenda what was planned.
Sure. In that way, yeah, it was very mind blowing to see there was a lot of seriousness in terms of implementation rather than just talking.
Yeah.
So broadly, they wanted to do three things, which is if there are games that are being made on Indianness, it could be culture, mythology, or social landscape, lifestyle, etc. Anything to do with Indianness, how
Yeah.
can we support such games was one of their initiative.
Right.
Second thing is SCRB and INAE or science and engineering based central government agencies, right? So they do a lot of R&D. So
Yeah.
they wanted to figure out ways in which they could push advancements and research in terms of game related technologies and processes.
Yeah.
What are the different ways in which they could help game studios? That was another one.
Right.
And the last one would be what kind of platforms could we create that could connect the government, game industry, and the academia together for knowledge exchange, resource exchange, combined R&D, etc., etc. So these were the three main pillars of,
Yeah.
or let's say the support areas they were looking for.
Okay, so there were a lot of things planned in that day, right? Can you just give a brief on how the panels were basically planned?
Sure, sure. So during the pre-conclave, they broadly identified two panel discussions. One more to do with the academia, the other one is leisure. So that is
Yeah.
where I helped them figure out what sort of topics should be made
Mhm.
with regards to the 3 points that they are focusing upon, which I just mentioned.
Yeah.
So in the leisure game side of things, what we spoke about is we had two panels, right? So we broadly spoke about if there are games being made on Indian aspects,
Yeah.
what are the different challenges involved? How can we overcome that? And then what are the places in which we lack? It could be infrastructure, finance, or anything that as an industry that we lack in, or creative
Right.
aspects. How do we bridge that gap?
Right.
What kind of support can we take? So these were two main aspects that we were talked about, and obviously we did show footages from our game a little to connect it
Yeah.
with our research points, I suppose.
Yeah, and we actually got some good response from the people over there, right? So there were again, just to add to that, there were people from government, there were people from IITs, there were gaming industry folks. Then the whole point was to see if their capabilities, their skills, their work, their research that they are doing can help gaming industry to grow, whether it can, right? So I also remember a couple of sessions that happened that were given by IIT guys where they showed few plugins that they created. You remember that the dhoti draping stuff, right? Yeah, it was absolutely mind blowing. So one IITian just showed a simple piece of cloth which automatically drapes it to the main character, and it was interesting to see because I think Chirag mentioned this point during the panel, that we usually, when we are making games, when we get stuck in some tech part, we usually just go to the asset store, buy the plugin, and just use it and move forward, right? We don't actually sit and solve the problem. We don't, so that it can be reused as a technology, we can reuse and share it with the peers, but we just use plugins. And it was visible, like it was very evident that the research that IITians are doing, or these academias are doing, would probably help us in terms of game development, where they can solve a lot of problems that we face in the tech, right?
Yeah, big time. Like just that IIT, the cloth simulation thing that we saw, all of us got mind blown, right? Especially
Yeah.
because and all the characters in our games are saris and dhotis. So
Yeah.
we didn't know how to solve it, and then they came on board and they showed it. It was quite happy to, and I think a part of their inspiration comes from this Central India push, right? Atmanirbhar.
Yeah.
Like they want to go towards self-reliance more and more, and how we could academia and industry can solve each other's problem, I suppose.
Correct. Correct. And that is something which is perfectly on tracks of what we could possibly do together to make gaming pretty big industry in India. Um, yeah, so it was pretty interesting. The overall thing was pretty interesting. Do you can you just touch base on few action points that we discussed overall, and things that probably can get executed in the next few years, based on our discussion? And yeah, so what's your thought? What was the summarization of this whole thing?
Sure. So after that one whole day event, the next thing that happened right before the networking dinner is the heads were asking that give us a consolidated note from the industry's perspective, as in where and all do you guys need support,
Yeah.
in keeping with what we discussed, not something outside of it, but within what we discussed.
Right.
So in that we broadly categorize few things, which is the first among that is game prototype grant scheme.
Yeah.
So we are kind of like modeling it. So there are many countries abroad which has a prototype scheme like this, like UK, Australia, France. So we took
Yeah.
elements of it, tweaked it a little so that it supports or works well with the Indian game development scene.
Yeah.
And that is one thing that we have put forth. Because I was very surprised to know that the government people itself in the event came forward and said, we spoke all of this, fine, but let's get this together in a grant scheme.
Right.
So that was very interesting to know, because even from their side there was a push towards, or this realization that startups need funding
Yeah.
even in ideation stage. So that was very supportive. So in that way, that was one thing that we are putting in our note.
Yeah, just to add to that, there was I think Casper from Germany, right, who attended the event. Uh, he spoke about a couple of things, and it actually reminded me of our visit. Like me and Chirag went to Germany back in 2018 for a game mixer. It just recollected, like I just you know it took me back to that time when we saw a lot of stuff over there, which was amazing that the government was doing for them. Just to give you a brief, there were grants, right? There were grants that a lot of companies have already got from the government to make probably the kit games that they were building. But there was one interesting thing that I would like to mention. There's a building in Germany, in Cologne specifically. There's a building called as Game House. Okay, Game House, HAUS. Now, the interesting part is this whole building, 8-floor building. Every company in that building is a gaming company. Okay, and the government has provided the space for the companies to work over there with a lot of benefits on the rent and whatever things that require for a startup to upscale, right? So these are things that are already happening in the West, and it was great to see that the Indian government is also taking steps so that we somewhere land into this scenario where we have a lot of support.
Yeah, just to add on to what you were saying, because this will read a wider audience.
Yeah.
So Indian government does do grant programs. In fact, they've put 1,000 crores 2 years back into funding startups that are mostly in the seed or pre-seed, as in ideation stage.
Right.
But then it didn't necessarily transform over to entertainment startups. But now there is a lot of push towards Indian games industry and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think now is the time that we could say, okay, you have found supported with prototyping with other sectors.
Yeah.
Maybe it's good to do with gaming as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So
Yeah.
the grant part was what's the next?
Sure. What is the next is there was a lot of queries from the academia side as to where the industry and the academia can collaborate. What sort of parameters? Because when we collaborate, it's not just okay, साथ में मिलके काम करते हैं. So there's a lot of complex legalities or commercial terms involved, right?
Right.
So they wanted to know what were the probable engagement model in which we could collaborate with each other.
Correct.
So that is one thing that we outlined in our document to them. Apart from that, what else do we have? We have, okay, this is another interesting thing that we have to touch upon. India, unlike many other countries, because we are so vast, it is both a boon but also a challenge, right?
Right.
Because we want to make something on a mythology or history.
Yeah,
There are so many variations that some or the other one will get offended.
Yeah.
The sentiments got hurt or stuff like that. So we suggested that there has to be a subject matter expert committee panel.
Yeah.
From stuff like history, anthropology, archaeology, psychology, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So that we could go to them and say, see, this is what we are making a game on. Where are we going wrong? Or is there something that we could make better?
Yeah.
Like a committee that we could go and talk. So broadly, I think these are the three main things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would add two more to this. I'm not sure how this whole thing would be executed, but two more things is one is the center of excellence, and the mentorship or the institutes that we were speaking of, right? It wouldn't be like a immediate thing, but probably they at least understood what the base level problem in the gaming sector in India is because of us, because what we told them, right? People don't understand the difference between what the domains are, the game art, game design, and all that stuff, right? So having mentorships which are very which are official, which are government approved kind of things, probably like a 1 year, 2 year courses that can come up. We never know, but there are chances that those things might come up, right? And the second thing is, like you mentioned it the other day about the age ratings and the policies, right? Can you also talk about that?
Sure. Uh, so every country has its own form of age ratings for games that release on console, right?
Yeah,
PC is kind of like goes without age rating, but consoles we definitely need it.
yeah,
So India at the moment we use PEGI, which is used in Europe. So the broader consensus among the industry is we are just one mistake away from being heavily scrutinized by the government in
yeah,
terms of content guidelines and stuff like that. It happened with the OTT side of industry in India. We don't want that happening to us, right?
yeah,
And the the broader idea is if we could proactively go to the government and say, see, ESRB, PEGI, CERO, they are all being used, right? Let's form an age rating guideline or content policy which the game industry can self-regulate,
right.
and it could be overseen by the government
Mm,
so that we could avoid potential problems at a pan-Indian scale.
correct,
and
correct.
the other side of that is we see a lot of these news, right? That people losing money over games or things like kids committing suicide or stuff like that. I
Yeah,
believe the problem is more so to do with a lack of age regulation in India with regards to games.
yeah,
People don't even know, as in the market, the common man doesn't know that age rating does exist for games.
yeah, yeah.
But then getting it on board in our country and letting it distribute among the gaming market, I think that would potentially solve some of these problems as well.
Yeah, and then on top of that, there is the monster topic of RMG, the betting and gambling stuff, right? Which we actually don't want to get into. Yeah. So yeah. So the discussion, the summarization is all fine. What is happening now? What is happening now? How are we taking this ahead?
Sure. So the first step that we are doing is making a consolidated industry report,
Yeah.
as in what are all the things that we need and putting it and getting it vetted by pretty much every console and PC game development studio in India.
Yeah.
So it will represent all of our best interest forward for the game industry of India and give it to them. And then obviously they would have few things that they want to tweak or add on top of it. So it'll be a back and forth process, and then we'll fix it. And probably, I think within 2-3 months is what the SERB head was telling that this would materialize.
All right, awesome, super good news for the gaming industry in India, right? Super thrilled to actually get this executed. Just before we end this session, we just have 5 more minutes, but can you tell us what is happening with Outlier before we go?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for letting me plug myself. So we are making a little indie game called Deliverance. So it is like a linear single-player story-driven game, action adventure.
Yeah.
So it takes place in fictional ancient India. So currently we are making a prototype. So we are a bit early into the process, but we have spoken to quite a few publishers like Annapurna Interactive, Playstack, Curve Digital, Raw Fury,
Yeah.
11-bit studios, and they have positively responded to what we have.
Yeah.
They like the narrative and the art style that we are going for. It's just a matter of finishing the gameplay demo and probably get a publishing deal. But
Yeah.
we are going steadily. Let's see how it goes.
Yeah, all the best, man. Wish you luck. I'm sure the future, like the couple of years from now, there will be a lot more games on PC and consoles. I mean, we don't want to become the best or like having a lot of games coming out from PC and console, because mobile will always be on the top in India because of the consumption, right? But we obviously need some good quality indie, say, or AAA or PC and console games from India on the global level, where they can actually depict India's culture and ethos, because there is a lot of stuff. There are a lot of stories to be told. So yeah, all the best, man. Pretty amazing insights and very interesting topics. We'll definitely do another podcast on few more topics, because I really had a fun chat today. Um, Yeah, that's it. Thank you guys. Thank you for watching the podcast. I hope it was useful. And India is growing big in gaming industry now. Let's hope all these things get executed soon.
I think in 5 years' time, the landscape would be a bit different, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. There's no doubt to it. Yeah. So that's it for the video, guys. If you're discovering the channel for the very first time, do subscribe. And if you like the video, please leave a comment. And see you all in the next episode of the gaming podcast by Underdogs. Bye bye.